This is a Victorian side table which was manufactured in Britain in the 1890s. What is most surprising about the design, considering that it was made in Britain, is that it incorporates many distinctly Chinese elements, including the black lacquer finish and the golden dragon. This style, which is a mixture of both European design and Chinese design, is known as Chinoiserie. And today we are going to discover the origins of the Chinoiserie style, and we are going to explore the extent to which the British and French were addicted to the Chinoiserie style in the 18th and 19th centuries. In 17th century Europe, China was a distant and mysterious place that the general population knew virtually nothing about. The little understanding that they had of the East came from two main sources: the Christian missionaries who travelled there to spread the Christian faith, such as the German Jesuit Athanasius Kircher, and the small number of primarily Portuguese and Dutch merchants who traded there. Europeans gradually became fascinated with the stories that the missionaries told of China and of the objects that the merchants imported back from the region, which included silk, porcelain, and some furniture. The Europeans' infatuation with Chinese-style designs steadily increased, and beginning in the late 17th century, French craftsmen began to create their own high-quality imitations of Chinese art, which were known as chinoiserie. Over time, the French word chinoiserie came to refer to anything produced in the West that was stylistically Chinese, whether that be architecture, garden design, painting, or furniture. The production of chinoiserie furniture in Britain was popularised in the 18th century by several prominent publications. These included William Halfpenny's 1750 publication, New Designs for Chinese Temples, and Thomas Chippendale's The Gentleman and Cabinet Maker's Director, which was published in 1754. In his work, Thomas Chippendale developed a fusion of Rococo style with Chinese and Gothic elements, a style which ultimately developed into English Rococo. This English Rococo was the first time that British furniture had original designs, and was not simply an imitation of work produced in France. Another book, Designs of Chinese Buildings, written by Sir William Chambers, was released in 1757. Sir William Chambers had studied Chinese architecture extensively during his voyages to China with the Swedish East India Company in the 1740s. Perhaps one of the most famous of his works was the Chinese pagoda in Kew Gardens in West London, which was completed in 1762. This pagoda, shown here in both the early 20th century and after its restoration in 2018, was the first pagoda to be built in Europe. The dragons, which are perched on each of the corners of the pagoda, typify Chambers' tendency to exaggerate the Chinese elements in his work. Evidently, these dragons designed by William Chambers are fanciful interpretations of those that would be found in China. Also found in Kew Gardens are two Ming Dynasty stone guardian lion statues. Their origins and how they came to sit in Kew Gardens are a mystery, but their presence does demonstrate the designers of the garden's fascination with Chinese art. One of my favourite examples of British chinoiserie from the 18th century is the Chinese bedroom designed by the father and son team William and John Linnell for Babington House in Gloucester, which was owned by the Duke of Beaufort. The Chinese room in Babington House was completed in 1754, and included in the design was this bed frame and this standing shelf. The bed frame was designed to look like a Chinese tea pavilion, which were very popular in European gardens at the time. The headboard, which faced the wall, was designed with Chinese-style latticework. This latticework is similar to the latticework found all over China, such as the one in the Summer Palace in Beijing, which is shown in this photograph. On the eaves of the roof of the bed were perched dragons. Interestingly, the design of these dragons is similar in design to the dragons found on the pavilion at Kew Gardens. The standing shelves from the Chinese room at Babington House were also modelled on a pavilion, but had bells on the side, which would typically chime in the wind on Chinese pavilions. One example of these bells can be found on the Hai Bao Pagoda in China's Ningxia province. The chime produced by the bells when the wind blows is both soothing to the ears for humans and has the ability to frighten birds away who are resting on the pavilion. Also of note on the standing shelves are the spiralling pillars, which are a common feature of English Rococo. In 1790, the British government sent its first trade embassy to China, named the Macartney Expedition, which attempted to pressure the country to open up for foreign trade. William Alexander, a British artist, accompanied them on the journey, and he painted many stunning watercolours of the expedition, including this one. The Chinese emperor was unimpressed by the British gifts offered to him by Macartney, and the trade mission ultimately failed to persuade the Qing Empire to open its doors to foreign trade. But William Alexander's paintings went on to strongly influence British perceptions of China throughout the following century, and they triggered a resurgence in British interest in Chinese-style designs. The interior designs of the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, which was completed in 1823, were based off of William Alexander's imagery. As you can see, the designs mix Western and Eastern art styles, and certain features that the British thought were mysterious and exotic were accentuated. Just as with the dragons on the pagoda at Kew Gardens, the designs of the Royal Pavilion were an exaggerated and fanciful interpretation of Chinese art and architecture, which drew as much from the imagination of the British artist as from the original Chinese source material. There are many other unexpected areas of British art that were deeply influenced by Chinese designs during the 18th and 19th centuries. One example is wallpaper. Chinese motifs frequently appear on the wallpaper of the mansions kept by the British aristocracy during the period. These wallpaper panels were installed into the Moor Park mansion in Hertfordshire in the late 18th century, around the time of the Macartney embassy to China. Initially, wallpaper panels were imported from China into Europe, but over time, British and French manufacturers began to make their own imitations of Chinese wallpaper. As both British overseas trade and the British Empire continued to expand throughout the Victorian period, other fusion art styles also developed. Also emerging during the Victorian period was the Anglo-Japanese style, which flourished after trade with Japan was opened up in 1853. One of the best examples of this style is the Peacock Room, seen here in a picture from 1892. This used to be the dining room of the London residence of the British shipping magnate Frederick Richards Leyland. He also used this room to display his collection of Chinese blue and white porcelain. This Anglo-Japanese style Peacock Room was later purchased by an American named Charles Lang Freer in 1904, and the whole room was shipped to his mansion in Detroit, Michigan, where he recreated the room and displayed his own collection of Asian ceramics. The rebuilt room is seen here in 1923, and the room still survives to this day. By the mid-19th century, furniture and art with Chinese design elements were extremely popular in British homes. Yet, photography was a new invention at the time, meaning that pictures of the interiors of Victorian homes are very rare. But fortunately, examples do exist, including these photographs, which were taken by Lady Frances Jocelyn. She was an aristocratic woman from the Victorian period who was one of the first women ever to take up photography as a hobby. Her photographs give us a valuable insight into the makeup of upper-class homes during the Victorian period. Note the copious amounts of porcelain on the shelves and the English Rococo furniture spread across the room. This is a piece of British Chinoiserie furniture which dates from the late Victorian period. The side table was manufactured in the 1890s and displays clearly both British and Chinese elements. British influences include the drop-leaf sides. Drop-leaf sides being a retractable leg which can be pulled back and a foldable side which can be folded down when the table is not in use. This is useful for limiting the amount of space that a table uses when it is not in use. Here on the surface though, you can clearly see the Chinese influences, being the black lacquer finish and the gilt golden dragon. Also note the spiraling legs, which we spoke about earlier, which are typical in English Rococo. In English Rococo, these are actually referred to as bobbin legs. This type of table was actually mass-produced, with countless identically designed tables hitting the British market in the late Victorian period, although some of them came with different surface designs. This one, which was also produced in the last decade of the 19th century, came with gilt golden floral patterns as opposed to dragon designs. As we have seen, the Chinoiserie style developed over the course of 300 years, beginning in the early 17th century as the crude imitations by French craftsmen of Chinese art and furniture. By the mid-18th century, it had developed into a high art form, and you could expect to find items of Chinoiserie throughout the homes of the respectable aristocracy in both Britain and France. By the mid-19th century, the accessibility of Chinoiserie had expanded further, and items of furniture such as this were commonplace throughout the homes of the middle class in both France and Britain.